Hello and welcome to part 3 in the 10-part xAPI and Articulate Storyline tutorial series. This tutorial is where things are finally going to get interesting because it's where we're going to finally send custom xAPI statements from an Articulate Storyline course. So this is probably what you all have been waiting for, and these first 3 tutorials really serve as the foundation for the next 7 to come. So if you get this one down, then the rest of it should be smooth sailing. Make sure you have completed the first 2 or you're going to feel a bit lost in this tutorial. But if you are ready to go, then let's go ahead and dive in. So I want to start off by explaining a coding concept. We've talked about variables, we've talked about JSON objects, but now we want to talk about functions because we will need to use a function to send our xAPI statements. So let's go ahead and open the console in a web browser. You don't need to follow along with this part, but if you do, it's probably going to give you a better idea of how functions work. So you can just watch me if you want. We can open the console by pressing F12 in the browser or right-clicking in a dead area on the screen and selecting Inspect and then selecting Console at the top. So you might see some errors or warnings here. Don't worry about it. That's just for whatever web page you're on. But we want to execute some code here so I can show you how it works. So the console makes a function available called console.log, and whenever you execute that function, it will log whatever you put between these parentheses to the console, which is what we're in. So when I press enter here, sure enough, it logs Devlin to the console. Now, let's say I don't want to type out console.log every time, and I want to create my own function that will print something to the console. So I'll call that function print. And let me show you this. So function print, and we're not going to pass any parameters right now. We'll add these 2 curly brackets to create the function, and then within this, we'll type console.log Devlin. Okay, so when I execute this, nothing happens because I need to actually call the function. So I do that just by typing out print, adding those parentheses, and pressing enter. And now it prints my name. So, naturally, we might not want to print my name every time, so we will pass it a parameter. Well, we'll add a parameter to the function. So watch this, function print, and we'll pass it a message. We'll add that curly bracket, and that will say console.log whatever the message is. Okay, so you see what we're doing here? We're using this placeholder basically, which is going to serve as a variable, and whatever we pass to that print function, it will place into this console.log function. So I'm going to press enter here, and now when I do print Devlin, it will print my name. If I print hello world, it will log hello world to the console. So this is an important concept for this video. I hope that's clear. But let's actually, dive into our specific code. So I'm going to hop over to the xAPI statement.javascript file that we created over the last 2 videos. So if you don't have this open now, go ahead and pause the video, get it open, and we will move right along. Okay, so as you can see here, we're not using a function. We just have this code lined up here, and every time this code runs, it's going to just pass in this the completed verb and verb ID and this write xAPI statement tutorial info. So, depending on the actions the user is taking in the storyline course, the verb and the object is going to change. So let's go ahead and first let's go ahead and give this a variable. So we'll call this statement, and that will be the entire JSON object because a variable can hold an object. So our statement variable, which we're defining with the const keyword, contains this entire statement JSON object. So if we're good with that, we want to go ahead and turn this into a function now. So let's place your cursor right at the very beginning of the first line and do a line break. And now we'll make a function here. Function send statement. We'll add those 2 parentheses, and then we'll add an opening curly bracket. If you're in Visual Studio Code, it will automatically end that closing curly bracket, so just go ahead and remove it from there. Go to the very bottom, add a line break, and add in that closing curly bracket. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and indent all of these items so that you know, it's clear where the hierarchy is now. So I'm just using the tab key. You can also add spaces, or you can really leave it as it is, but this will make it a bit easier to see what's going on and what's a child of what. Okay, so there we go. So everything we have now is inside of this function. Now, you know, like we were discussing, the ID, the verb, the object ID, and the object definition is going to be different based off of what's happening in the storyline course. So we're going to add some parameters to this function, just like we did over here, how we passed a message. We're going to pass these, you know, pass arguments, they're called, to take these values. So we're going to pass a verb ID, an object, and an object ID. Okay? So just add a comma between each word, and these are called parameters. So they're called parameters when you add them here, and when you actually pass a value, when you execute the code, it's called an argument. So let me show you over here. This message keyword right here is a parameter, and when I say print Devlin, Devlin is the argument that we're passing to it. So once we've added these items between these parentheses to this function, we can actually start replacing it in the code. So where we have this verb ID, I'm just going to erase this completed verb, quotes and all, and I'm going to type in verb ID just as I would if I were using a variable like uname.js or uemail.js. And then same thing with the display. I'm going to get rid of this completed string, and I'm going to just add the verb parameter, because, you know, we're going to pass this actual value from storyline, and we'll get there next. So same with object and object ID. This right here is the ID, so I'm going to replace this with object ID. And with the name here, the English name, we're going to get rid of that and just type in object. Okay, so our code is looking good now. We have all of our parameters set up and they're in the right places, but we need to add more to make this statement actually ready to send. You know, we need more in our function. And the most important thing we need to add is the conf object. And that's going to tell us, you know, which learning record store we're actually sending our xAPI statement to. So let's create a new object here called conf. So just conf, and it's going to be a constant, and it's going to have two values. It's going to have an endpoint, and I'm just going to add a placeholder here because we don't know what that will be yet. And it's going to need an auth property. So auth auth, and that's going to have some specific language here. So it's going to be basic with a space, and that's going to be a string. And then we're going to add to base 64, and then it's, to base 64, open parentheses, and it's going to be the key and the secret. Or another way to put that is the user and the password. Okay, so I'm going to give you a second to look at this. What's going on here in this auth value is we're using a function that's going to be made available to us by an xAPI JavaScript wrapper that we're going to add to our storyline output folder. So it's going to look and maybe sound a bit confusing right now. Don't worry, it's all going to come together by the end of this video. Just make sure you have things spelled exactly as they are here, or your code will not work. So the auth is the basic with a space, and that's a string, plus to base 64. The B is capitalized, and inside of that we have in parentheses user colon password, and that user and that password, those are placeholders. We're going to get those values from our learning record store. So with this decided, with this set up like that, we have to add a couple more pieces of code. So, like I mentioned earlier, we are going to use a JavaScript wrapper that makes it easier to communicate with the learning record store. So, we would have to add a lot more code, and it would be more complicated if we weren't using that wrapper. But ADLNet, the people behind the xAPI spec, make that wrapper available. so that we don't need to we don't need to have our code so complex. So once we set up this conf object, we have to actually tell our learning record store that we've updated it and that it needs to verify the credentials. So I'm just going to grab that code from right off screen here, paste it. So that is all capital ADL.xAPI and then capital W wrapper dot change config with that config C capitalized and in parentheses conf. So just, pause the video if you need to, look at this, make sure you have this spelled and added exactly as it is. We're using this change config function of the xAPI wrapper, and we're passing it this function that we just set up that will have our learning record store credentials in it. So that's important. And there's one last thing we need to do. It's actually at the very bottom of the function. So do a line break between these last two curly brackets, and we need to pass this piece of code that's going to actually send our xAPI statement. So we're creating a variable called result, and again we're using an xAPI wrapper function called send statement, and we're passing it this statement variable that has our xAPI statement JSON object. So again, pause it if you need to. Make sure you get this typed exactly as it is. All it's doing is using the xAPI wrapper to send our xAPI statement to the learning record store. Once you have that done, our code is ready to go. The code is good. We're not going to need to change anything else here. The hardest part is out of the way, so good job. Again, pause it if you need to, because we're moving on to the learning record store. So in this video, we're going to use Veracity Learning Record Store. If you have your own LRS and you want to use that and test things out on there, feel free. But if you want to follow along, go ahead and go to lrs.io, create a free account, and get signed in. Pause the video if that will take you a minute, because once you're signed in, you'll see this screen. Okay, so once you're in and you have your account set up, click this green Create an LRS button. You need to give your LRS a unique name. I'm just going to name mine Devlin Peck YouTube. You don't need to worry about either of these checkboxes. Just press Create. Okay, and we're in. Once you're in, scroll down. You see my Devlin Peck YouTube one right here, so I'll click on this one. And once you're in, you'll see a URL right here. So see mine, devlinpeckyoutube.lrs.io/xAPI. You're going to want that URL because that is our xAPI endpoint. So go ahead and click that copy to clipboard button right next to it. I'm going to hop back over to our code, and where you have this endpoint key value pair, you want to paste in that endpoint where we had the placeholder before. So it should still be surrounded by those quotes, and it should be pasted exactly as you copied it. So now it's telling us where to send our xAPI data, but we need to actually get authenticated because we don't want just anyone to be able to send this data. We only want to be able to send it from our code. So back in the LRS window, you'll see this No Access Keys option. Go ahead and click that. And then click Create New Key. It's a big green button. We'll name the key, so we'll just name it authorization. That's what I'll name mine. You can name it whatever you want. It's asking us if we want to have both read and write permission. I'm going to turn off read permission because we don't want people to be able to pull data from our learning record store. We just want to be able to send data to it because that's all we're going to be doing in our storyline course for now. So we'll leave write permission on. We want to make sure that it's enabled. And here you'll see that username and password option. So I think from right here, I'll just go ahead and copy and paste these options. And you can change them to make them more simple or more complex as you want. But I'm just going to copy the username, hop back over to the code, and place it in where I had that user placeholder. And then I'll copy the password, go ahead and erase this password placeholder and paste it in. So again, we only have one set of quotes surrounding the whole things. It's the username or the key, and then a colon, and then it's the password or the secret. So once that's good, go ahead and do Control S or save your code. because we're good to go now. Well, we need to do one last thing over in our LRS page, and that's actually create the key to make sure that it works. There we go. It tells us we have one access key. Our endpoint is set up. We're golden right now. We're good to go. So all that we need to do now is actually set up our articulate storyline file and track the things that we want to be tracking here. So I'm going to work from this file that we set up in our last video. If you already have a file like this and you know what you want to track with xAPI, feel free to apply that to what you're working on. But if not, I'm going to, you can follow along here. So I'm going to create a new slide here. I'm going to right click, go to new slide, basic layout, and blank. I'm going to click on this submit button and add a new trigger that makes it jump to the next slide when the user clicks it. Okay? So on this next slide, I'm going to create a really basic question slide. So I'll just add a question here. What is the answer? And again, this is just for demo purposes. Okay, so we'll add this, what is the answer? And then I'm going to add a shape. Or I guess I'll add a few shapes. So I'll call it choice A. So good, it's bold, I'll make it centered. And I'm gonna just pull it down. I'm gonna hold down Shift and Control. And when I let go of it with Control selected, it will make a copy. So there we go. Now I'll just call this one choice B and this one choice C. So you can see what's going on here. It's pretty simple. I'm gonna do one more thing, and I'm gonna make, maybe we have an optional cheat sheet up here. Okay? So say someone doesn't know the answer, they want to view this, we'll add a view cheat sheet option. So I'm just going to keep working on this file. I'm going to make a new layer now called cheat sheet. When the user clicks this button, I'm going to make a trigger so that it shows the cheat sheet layer when the user clicks it. And now we'll just give away the answer on this layer. So I'm going to give it a background. I'm going to add a text box. So we'll say the answer is C. Make it nice and big. And now I just need to add a button. I'll copy one of these buttons from over here, paste it in. I'll give it a white fill so we can actually see what's going on. And I'll give it a blue text color. And we'll call it close cheat sheet. Okay. And now I need to make sure that when the user clicks it, it hides this layer. So there we go. We have a really basic slide set up. There are 3 options, and when the user clicks this view cheat sheet button, it will show this layer, and when they click this button, it will hide this layer and bring us right back here. So now say we want to add some xAPI triggers so that we know what the user is clicking on this slide. So let's start with the view cheat sheet option. So we want to send an xAPI statement that Devlin viewed the cheat sheet whenever I click this button. So how we would do that is with an execute JavaScript trigger. Okay, this is where we're going to be executing that function that we just set up. So select the cheat sheet, click on this create new trigger button, and select the execute JavaScript option. Okay, so now the action is execute JavaScript when the user clicks rectangle 4. That's good, that's what we want. Click on this red JavaScript button on the second line, and this is where we'll actually enter the code that we want to execute. So let me show you something. I'm going to hop back over here to our code. We want to just copy what we have right here. So after the function keyword, but before that curly bracket, go ahead and copy that, and we're going to paste it in right here. So right now we have send statement, and between the parentheses a verb ID, object, and object ID. So we need to actually pass in the arguments, which are going to be passed directly into our xAPI statement because we have these placeholders. So let's start with the object. So we'll call the object cheat sheet, and the object ID, we're just going to use the example.com domain. So http://example.com/cheat sheet. Again, this is a uniform resource identifier. So in a production environment, you do not want to use this example.com domain. you want to use either a domain that you or your organization controls. And it doesn't need to go to an actual public-facing web page. It just needs to be a unique identifier that will always refer to this cheat sheet in this course. Or just this cheat sheet in general, I guess I should say. So we have that part done. We know that the verb is viewed. So again, I'm adding all of this inside of quotation marks. Make sure that the commas are outside of the quotation marks. And now we just need this verb ID for viewed. So we're going to go over to the xAPI.vocab.pub resource. And once you're there, go hover over Browse at the top and select Verbs. This is the list of all of the community accepted xAPI verbs. So I'm going to Control F and search for viewed. That's interviewed. We don't want that. Previewed, reviewed, no. Here we go. We have viewed. Indicates that the actor has viewed the object. So it's this id.tincanapi.com/verb/viewed. So I'm going to copy that, hop back over to my storyline file, get rid of the verb ID placeholder, and paste in that URI I just copied. So here we have it. We're going to be sending an xAPI statement that the user viewed the cheat sheet. So I'm going to press OK again, and once we set up the published output folder, that xAPI statement will get sent to our Veracity Learning Record store. We're good to go, so hang tight, you'll see how powerful this is. So I'm just gonna press this up arrow right here to make sure that when the user clicks this button, it executes the JavaScript first and then shows them the layer. The ordering is important, so just make sure that that execute JavaScript trigger is on top. The next thing we want to do is we want to execute statements or send statements whenever someone clicks on one of these answer choices. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this execute JavaScript trigger, click on choice A, and paste it. And now I'll just click on where it says JavaScript in the trigger, and it will open up the JavaScript that's getting executed. So this time, we don't want to say that the user viewed the cheat sheet. We want to say that the user answered, and then we'll say whatever the choice is. So in this case, we're going to get rid of cheat sheet as the object, and we're going to put choice A. And we'll get rid of this part of the URI here for the object ID and change it from cheat sheet to choice-A. Now, I do want to point out here that when you are sending xAPI statements about a user answering a question, there is a better place to hold the user's response than in the object ID. Typically you would say that the object is the question, so question 1, and then the actual choice would be held in the result response part of the xAPI statement. We're not there yet. We're going to get there a few tutorials from now. This is just for demo purposes, so you can see how cool it is to see what people are doing in the course. So I just wanted to add that disclaimer. Let's finish this up. The user isn't viewing this, they're answering it. So I'm going to add in answered instead of viewed. And now we'll hop back over to this resource, Control F, and we'll get the answered verb URI. We want to use this adlnet.gov one right here. So I'm going to copy this, go back over to storyline, get rid of this viewed verb, and paste in the answered verb ID. So this is what our code will look like for choice A. So I'm going to press OK. I'm going to copy this trigger, I'm going to paste it in choice B, and this one will be much easier to modify. We're just going to change choice A to choice B, and A to B right here. And finally, I'll click on choice C, paste the trigger again, and this time just change A to C and A to C. So there we have it. We have all the code we need. We're going to send xAPI statements anytime someone clicks any of these buttons. So let's jump into it. I'm going to save this story file. We need to publish it now. So I'm just going to publish it for web. It's being published to my desktop. That's perfect. Make sure it's publishing the entire project and select publish. Okay, there we go. Once it's done being published, press this open button right here. Don't press anything else, just press open. And this will show us the output folder for our storyline course. So there's two things we need to do. Once you get the hang of it, you can do it in like less than 30 seconds. So the first thing is we need to add the xAPI files that we need to this output folder. So this is the first one. It's the xAPI-statement.javascript file that we've been working on this whole time. I'm just going to go ahead and go to File, Save As. I'm going to go to my desktop. Here's the storyline output folder. So this is the same folder we have open right here. So I'm just going to directly save as, press save, and as you see, that file is here now. Another way to do it is you could save this file wherever it is, go to that location and copy it, and then you can paste it into this folder. So there's one more thing we need. Earlier I mentioned that xAPI JavaScript wrapper. Well, we actually need that file so that we can include it in this output folder. So I always, you can go to the direct URL, which is github.com/adlnet/xAPI wrapper/releases. So you can go there. I also always just Google it. I just Google xAPI JavaScript wrapper and I go to the GitHub link. Once you're on the releases, go ahead and you can click this button right here, xAPI wrapper.min.js. So I'm gonna click on that. It's going to download. I'm gonna show in folder. I'm gonna Control-C, copy it. And now I'm gonna go back over to our output folder and I'm gonna Control-V, paste it in. So this is perfect. We have our function that we created. We have the xAPI wrapper. Now we just need to tell our storyline course that it has those files available to it. Because if we don't do that, it's not gonna know what that send statement function is. So we're gonna right click this story.html file and click on open with code, or go to open with and then open it with whatever your text editor or code editor of choice is. So open with code. This is the story.html file. That's where you open to view your course. So once you've opened it with code, we're gonna scroll down to the very bottom and you'll see this closing body tag right here. So this is an HTML tag. It's gonna have a slash in front of it. As at the time of this tutorial, it's the third line from the bottom. So just put your cursor right before it and add a couple of line breaks so you have some space there. Now we're just going to add some script tags. I'm just going to copy and paste them from my tutorial. This is devlinpeck.com/tutorials/send-xapi-statement-storyline. And this is towards the bottom. I'm just going to copy this. So copy that, go back over to my code editor, and I'm going to paste it in right here. So what this is doing is this is telling our storyline course that there are these two JavaScript files available, the xAPI wrapper and the xAPI statement file. If you named your xAPI statement file something different, make sure you change this code right here from xAPI-statement.js to whatever your file is called, and it will need that .js extension at the end. So once you've done that, just go ahead and Control-S to save it, or File Save. We will go back to the folder, and making sure that these two files are here, and you've saved that story.html file with those script tags. Go ahead and double-click this to open it up, and it should open in your browser of choice. I'll go ahead and put in my name and email address. Press submit. And since I set up that trigger earlier, it brings me to the next slide. And now whatever I click in here should go ahead and send an xAPI statement. So let's say I answer choice A. So I clicked that. I'm going to move this over. Let's go to our LRS. To view the statements, you press xAPI data on the left and then press statements. And sure enough, here we have it. 10 seconds ago, Devlin answered choice A. And if you press this downward facing arrow, you can see the full JSON object that we created. So there's my name and email, there's the verb ID, answered, choice A, sure enough. And check this out. Let's go ahead and view the cheat sheet. Oh, it's telling me the answer is C, that's perfect. We'll close the cheat sheet and select choice C. So back over in here, let's go ahead and refresh. And as you see, we can see the entire, my entire journey. I answered choice A, I viewed the cheat sheet, and then I answered choice C. So really cool. It's all here. And there you have it. I mean, if you made it this far, then you're successfully sending custom xAPI statements from an articulate storyline course. The hardest part is out of the way, and from here in the next videos, we're only going to learn how to make our statements more professional and add more information to them, such as how long someone is spending on a given slide or resource, and what exactly they're typing into open text responses, that sort of thing. So if you're interested, go ahead and subscribe because those tutorials are coming. Or if you want to dive into it live and ask questions and dive a bit more in depth together, you can check out the live Crowdcast workshops just by Googling Devlin Peck Crowdcast and following me there or signing up for the sessions. So I hope you're able to work it out. If not, just go ahead and ask questions in the comments or shoot me an email. But yeah, if you did get it working, then good job. I will see you in the next video, and thanks for checking this one out. Bye for now.